Wow, it came out of nowhere. The United States of America finally applied some of the sanctions on the Russian Federation companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, the biggest Russian oil producers and oil sellers. What happened to our Donny? Has he finally understood that Russia is playing him? Maybe. Well, anyways, let's listen to what Donald Trump said here.
Well, I don't know that they will. I think that they'll certainly have an impact. They're massive sanctions. It's sanctions on oil. The two biggest oil companies, among the biggest in the world, but they're Russian. They do a lot of oil. And hopefully it'll push, hopefully he'll become reasonable, and hopefully Zelensky will be reasonable too. You know, it takes two to tango, as they say, and we're going to find out. They hate each other. These two people hate each other. You know that better than anybody. And it makes it more difficult than it should be. This should be easier to do. But the level of hatred between Zelensky and Putin is very substantial.
Could I add one thing? What the president is doing today with these sanctions is putting more pressure, of course, on both parties, in this case on Russia. It's all about changing the calculus, making sure that Putin understands that the president's vision this weekend of having a ceasefire, stop where they are, as you literally said, that this has to be step one now. And for him to really accept that vision and to come to the table. And then you have to put pressure. And this is exactly what he did today.
Yeah, you see, pressure on Russia. That is what we like here. And indeed, sanctions, they might work. But whether they destroy the Russian economy? Absolutely not, but they might make the sales of the Russian oil difficult. Yeah, yesterday some of the channels, also pro-Ukrainian channels, shared those kind of the graphics saying that, oh, the Russian stocks are falling down. Here we speak about Lukoil and Rosneft companies. Definitely they fall down, but if you check out the numbers, it's not too much. And that's the current situation with Lukoil, so the drop is not more than 4%. We are not speaking about some sort of the crash from 6,300 points to 5,800, nothing. For now, I wouldn't call it even a downfall. For example, if we take 5 years ago in 2023, the price were even lower, less than 4,000. Now it's 5,800. So if we check this perspective, no, the stocks are not falling down. Well, maybe they will fall in perspective because maybe some of the secondary sanctions could be applied. And in the sanctions document, definitely it is written about secondary sanctions and sanctions on the companies that continue to operate with Russian oil, but not the sanctions or tariffs on China government or Indian government. Here, they try to avoid it. That's what I said to you before, like United States of America, they're not interested to apply really 500% of the tariffs on China, as it was the project of the Lindsey Graham senator who really wanted to do it, but no, some of the companies, that's it. So here we have this document of the sanctions. There's the list of Lukoil, Rosneft. By the way, refineries are also out there. Great to see already those familiar names in this list. And here they say about the secondary sanctions, which could be applied on the foreign financial institutions continue to operate with the Russian oil, but also may risk. Yeah, may, it doesn't mean that they will be applied 100%. That is at least what I understood from reading this document. In addition, foreign financial institutions that conduct or facilitate significant transactions or provide any service involving Russia's military-industrial base. Also good. So this document is focused mainly on Lukoil or Rosneft, but also it touches different aspects of the Russian activity. Is it good? Yeah, of course, it is good. But whether it will force Russia to stop? Absolutely not. With Putin, absolutely the war will continue, so not just sanctions should be applied on Russia, but also there should be the massive military support of Ukraine. But Donald Trump still avoids, for example, sending to Ukraine Tomahawks. And also yesterday's information from the Wall Street Journal about the United States lifting restrictions on long-range weapons for Ukraine. Well, Donald Trump himself disapproved this information. The Wall Street Journal story on USA's approval of Ukraine being allowed to use long-range missiles deep into Russia is fake news. The United States has nothing to do with those missiles, wherever they may come from, or what Ukraine does with them. Well, at first I was like, okay, so maybe Ukraine still has those restrictions, and definitely this article is hoax. But no, actually here with the statement, Donald Trump says that Ukraine may use Storm Shadow or Scalp missiles wherever it wants. Do you see what he says here? The United States has nothing to do with those missiles. Here he means the European missiles like Storm Shadow or Scalp, wherever they may come from Europe. Who else supplies missiles to Ukraine? Well, the United States of America, but it seems like there was already permission for Ukraine to use ATACMS, and Ukraine doesn't have lots of the ATACMS missiles, so Storm Shadow is good to go. Despite those missiles are having components made from the United States of America, and before Ukraine got those restrictions from the United States of America to use missiles on Russian territory, but now Donny says that, I don't know, those are someone's missile, I don't know what they're doing, it's not me. So as you might see, it's the play of words. He wants to show to Putin that no, it's not him who gives that permission. But actually, in this case, the Wall Street Journal article is definitely correct. And on October 21st, so a couple of days ago, Ukraine has already used Storm Shadow missiles to hit Russian chemical plant, which is producing some sort of the powder components for Russian weaponry. It is located in Bryansk, so Bryansk chemical plant supplying the army of Russia. Storm Shadow is being confirmed by multiple of the sources. But it is European missile, so Europeans may do whatever they want with it. It's not Donny. Donny doesn't care, which is, I would say, a good position. Just recall Jake Sullivan from Biden's administration. They were so concerned. But I like that Donald Trump doesn't give up about this kind of the case. So Ukraine will hit many more interesting spots in Russia, more refineries, more military production facilities. Great. But still Ukraine needs different weaponry, including Tomahawk missiles, but Donald Trump hesitates to give it right now. And you know what, guys? We should thank one man. Because of him, sanctions were applied. He really asked for it. And the name of the guy is Lavrov, a Russian foreign minister. Right after his talk with Rubio, sanctions were introduced on Russia. No one was as successful as Lavrov before. All of those diplomats from Europe, Ukrainians, internal influence on Donald Trump within United States of America. Apply sanctions, Donny, come on. And here, just one conversation with Rubio. Here you go. By the way, it is great that Rubio is now in charge of this topic and not Witkoff, because Witkoff is absolute crazy guy. Donald Trump himself in Israel said that Witkoff is not competent. Yeah, probably you know that kind of the speech. Witkoff is a realtor, he is my friend, but he knows nothing about Russia, he knows nothing about Ukraine, but at the same time he forced Zelensky to capitulate, and Zelensky wrote about it, and after that there was the twist. So Rubio is now in charge of this deal, so-called deal with Russia, but this deal is not possible, we know it. Russia understands just pressure, but the current pressure, again, even with those sanctions, it's not enough. There should be massive sanctions introduced, not just Lukoil or Rosneft. There should be way more sanctions. So after this conversation between Rubio and Lavrov, it was understandable for Donald Trump that Putin wants to continue the war. They want to occupy Donbass. Zelensky doesn't want to give Donbass to Russia. It is also understandable. Donald Trump actually tried to push Zelensky for this kind of the scenario because Donald Trump wants to finish this war. And for him, it doesn't really matter, okay, this part of the land there, this part of the land here, Donbass, who cares? But for Ukraine, it is very important, and I already told you why, because it's the most robust defense of Ukraine from entire front lines, and by giving this territory to Russia, you just giving the rest of Ukraine to Russia, because after Donbass, there are just open fields, few of the settlements for Russia to go straight to Dnipro, Kharkiv, and maybe next. And after the conversation, Lavrov said that there are Nazis in Ukraine, that Russia will continue to deoccupy the territory from Nazis, something like that. Plus, after that phone call, Russia started to bomb Ukrainian facilities. They aimed actually 2 of the kindergartens. Yesterday, one was hit in Kharkiv, the other one this morning in Kiev. Lots of the other infrastructure was hit, including private buildings, civilian losses. It's crazy. Plus, at the same day, Putin started his nuclear drills, launching one of the missiles towards the United States of America. Yeah, it didn't touch the United States, but it was flowing straight forward to Alaska, the place of the previous meeting between Donald Trump and Putin, some sort of the déjà vu. And for sure, American military spotted those missiles flying, and there was some sort of the alert about this thing from the early warning systems, and this signal was given to Donald Trump as well. So Donald Trump's ego personally was touched because Putin openly humiliates Donald Trump. And even though we see how Trump really likes Putin, I mean personally, and doesn't like Zelensky, but he's forced to help Ukraine now because his best friend Putin, humiliates him openly. And ego, after all, is more important for Donald Trump than his relations with Putin. So in a way, Trump is forced to apply those sanctions on Russia because he has to react. People would not understand. 2 weeks, then 2 weeks, maybe you are too weak, Donny.
Well, I think that in terms of honesty, the only thing I can say is every time I speak with Vladimir, I have good conversations, and then they don't go anywhere. They just don't go anywhere. So in that sense, but
he explains here why he canceled the meeting with Putin in Budapest. Yeah, nice one. So finally Putin managed to annoy Donald Trump at that kind of the level. By the way, Trump mentioned that Putin wants really to take the entire Ukraine, but Trump insists for the war to stop at the current front lines. By the way, Zelensky also tells the same, that for Ukraine it is okay that if we follow some sort of the Korean scenario with some of the security guarantees. But Russia doesn't agree on that, and that's why Donny had no other choice but to apply those sanctions. Finally, even for his stupid orange mind, it became understandable. Well, hopefully it will be understandable also to support Ukrainian military with everything he can to support. Well, Bloomberg already published the information today that India's Russian oil flow expected to dry up after United States sanctions. Well, it could be definitely a good variant. And Trump is going to talk with Xi Jinping about purchasing the Russian oil. So here we go with this part of the message.
How do we end the war with Russia and Ukraine, whether it's through oil or energy or anything else? And I think he's going to be very receptive. He would now like to, I'm not sure that he did at the beginning. He would now like to see that war end.
He says about Xi Jinping. Trump called Xi a strong leader capable of influencing Putin to end war in Ukraine. But I think that China will continue to support Russia in any sort of the case. Well, maybe not trading directly through Lukoil or Rosneft, there are multiple of the other different companies in Russia, but they will support Russia. And China's officials already stated it before that they will not let Russia lose. Those were the words of the Chinese foreign minister that he said to European official representatives, Kaja Kallas, I think it was. And you may ask, what's the Russian reaction? Well, they used their almost nuclear weapon, Dmitry Medvedev, a Russian chemical weapon, yeah, because after all, alcohol has its own chemical formula. Here's the auto-translate from Telegram, kind of the big post, but I want to go through it. Trump's cancellation of the summit in Budapest, new sanctions against our country from USA. What else? Will there be new weapons besides the infamous Tomahawks? If any of the numerous commentators still had illusions, here you go. The USA is our enemy. And their talkative peacemaker, here he mentions Trump, has now fully taken up the path of war with Russia. Yes, he does not always actively fight on the side of Banderit Kiev yet, but this is now his conflict, not the senile Biden's. Of course, they will say that he could not do otherwise, that he was pressed in Congress, etc. This does not change the main thing. The decisions made are an act of war against Russia. And now Trump has fully aligned himself with the insane Europe. Oh my god. Well, let's continue what Dmitry says here. But there is a clear plus in the next swing of the Trump pendulum. It is possible to strike with various weapons at all Banderit hideouts without looking back at unnecessary negotiations, and to achieve victory exactly where it only possible, on the ground, not behind the desk. Destroying enemies, not making meaningless deals. Well, destroying enemies, he means enemy USA, or what? USA is our enemy, destroying enemies. Right, Dmitry? And yeah, you may say it's the Russian alcoholic Medvedev, but he is a Russian official. He is elsewhere in the Russian TV, and his post is the Deputy Secretary of the Russian Defense Committee, something like that. So he is not the last guy, and he barks, then Putin tells him to bark. He says something that Putin cannot say himself. So the message from Russia is the same. We don't care about your sanctions, we do not care about your tomahawks, we will continue this war. We'll reach victory on the ground, but it seems like the actual reality on the front line is a little different, right? The Russian spokesman of the Foreign Ministry, Zakharova, already mentioned that the sanctions are counterproductive, and instead Russia will continue developing its energy sector with confidence despite the pressure. Okay. Also, she claims that Russia is immune to the Western sanctions. And you know, guys, actually, she is at least partially correct because Russia has markets elsewhere, not just in Western countries, and you cannot shut down them completely. Still, there are many of the players who like to buy cheap natural resources. Russia has shadow fleet, Russia with its partners creating some sort of the one-day companies to trade oil, gas and everything. Yeah, it is harder with those sanctions, but after all, it is possible. So for Russia, it will just take some time to adapt to the new realities. But after all, if someone really wants to buy the Russian oil, Russia will find out the variant to sell it. It's like those sanctions on the Western-made equipment. Still, Ukraine finds the drone parts which are made in the United States of America, in Europe, in Japan. How Russia gets all of that? Well, not directly, but via third countries. Germany, France, and other countries, they somehow start to export more goods and tech goods to Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, maybe Turkey. Why? Well, you know the answer why. With oil, it's the same story. Top corporate managers, they're greedy, and it's very hard to cut those supply connections that continue to feed the Russian economy. So we'll see how it goes with those oil sanctions, but I don't think that they'll really force Russia to stop the war. And we have the great news from the European Union. It applied the 19th package of sanctions against Russia. It includes ban on imports, restrictions on movements of Russian diplomats, sanctions against those involved in deportation of Ukrainian children, penalties against the shadow fleet, new sanctions targeting Russian banks, and 100 foreign flagged tankers carrying Russian oil. Great! And Zelensky is now on a visit to Brussels, I guess. So very bad day for Russia, absolutely. And we have some of the update about Gripen jets that Ukraine will start to obtain probably in 3 years around. Well, at least for now, no one is saying about old Gripens. No, Ukraine signed a contract for new variant Echo. At least it is official information. It's just for people who write that Ukraine may obtain older jets right now and later on obtain new. No one says about it officially. But what they say that the deal price could be up to 9 billion euros, not 20 or 30 billion as I mentioned you before. However, I think that my number is more correct because together with jet, Ukraine should obtain infrastructure. Weapons, training, maintenance, spare parts, everything of that is very, very expensive. Maybe even more expensive than the jets themselves. Just imagine, maintain 100 of the airplanes. Crazy. But the good thing that proposal from Sweden is to use the confiscated Russian assets, which are not yet being confiscated, and mostly they're located in banks of Brussels. Now Europeans want to confiscate those. There are active talks ongoing, but actually Belgium may be even against it. Well, at least for now, their bureaucrats are saying that we will not bear all of the responsibility for this confiscation because Russia may go to the court against especially Belgium and Brussels. Guys, it's just crazy. By the time Ukraine has this huge risk for its sovereignty, those officials in Europe, those bureaucrats, once again, they don't want to risk even some of the financial stuff. I don't know, guys, we live in a parallel reality. By the way, Russian drones were spotted over Belgium and it seems like they don't really care. Yeah, Belgian Prime Minister will not be the only ones to pay Putin. So his conditions to confiscate those assets is to share legal risks among European countries. If the money has to be returned, all countries should do it, not just Belgium. And use frozen Russian assets not only in Belgium but also in other countries, but the main part is in Belgium, as I say too. And he says that they're gonna block this initiative not to allow confiscate Russian money. Okay. So the destiny of Ukrainian support, Ukrainian military lies in hands of those kind of the stupid suit-wearing clerics with watches that worth tens or maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros in this case. Yeah, guys, I just hate those bureaucrats and officials, especially in Europe. And because of those idiots, Ukraine doesn't have enough military support. Well, fuck them. Ukraine will still defend itself against Russia. And luckily we have support from normal, usual people from all around the world. They're purchasing drones, vehicles, everything. Guys, without normal people, Ukraine would have been occupied mainly by Russia a long time ago, without those FPV drones and etc, etc, etc. My friends, thank you so much for your kind support, especially on Patreon and membership of the channel. Without your support, my job is simply not possible. Thanks for you, I am filming more, so expect one more video upload today in a few hours dedicated to situation in Ukraine, front lines and other news. Now I wish you all a peaceful sky wherever you are and have a great time.